And with more on this is Newsnation political contributor and former chair of the D.C. Democratic Party, Scott Bolden, and the founder of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation, Christina Tobin. Great to have you both. Christina, I'd like to start with you. Let's begin with this federal judge's move to block President Trump from using the Alien Enemies Act. So how this all came about, as you know, the ACLU filed a lawsuit claiming the act could be used to deport any Venezuelan in the U.S., regardless of whether they're affiliated with Tren de Aragua or not. But we asked the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security about the motivations behind using this act specifically, and here's what she said.
Well, under that act, we're targeting TDA specifically. We want to get, that is an extremely dangerous gang from Venezuela that we have thousands of them in the United States of America that the Biden administration has allowed to proliferate. So we're targeting them, wanting to return them back to their home country, hopefully to face consequences.
So AG Pam Bondi, she responded to the judge's move, saying it puts the public and law enforcement at risk. A lot of similar comments being made by Americans in general. Do you believe Bondi has a point here?
I mean, what we have here is a democratically elected President Trump using his power to be able to make change here. I do feel that Trump is up against a flawed judicial system. The judicial system is appointed by the two-party system. In order to bring about truly solutions here, we need to aim and look at the law and case from an independent perspective. So I sit here as an expert in the electoral system and igniting an independent movement. And we're having a lot of back and forth between the president and a flawed judicial system. And with an independent paradigm rising, we'll be able to bring about solutions.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about that push-pull that you outlined. Scott, I'll get your reaction first.
Well, listen, we have three co-equal branches of government. That's not going to stop under the Constitution. And while these gangs that we have in the U.S., we have a lot of gangs in New York, but you can't deport these Venezuelan gangs under the Alien Enemies Act because, one, you have to be at war with someone. These gangs aren't affiliated or state-sponsored by Venezuela. Those are two important elements, and that's what Judge Boasberg, I think it's Boasberg, is getting at. And so I think Democrats and Republicans certainly, and even the judiciary, doesn't want dangerous illegal aliens in this country. At the same time, they have due process rights, and there is a process you have to go through to determine whether these, in fact, are gang members or not, or we're getting reports that some of these people may not be gang members. And so it's great that another country will take them, but you can't take the approach against the judiciary like I'm going to ask for forgiveness as opposed to permission, which is why those planes landed in another country. That being said, there'll be a big hearing on Monday, and I expect the judge to have choice words for the government, but also to denounce this act being the basis for deporting these individuals. There are other acts he could use, but this one's not applicable.
Well, to your point, let's talk about some of the legalese involved in this. The biggest arguments in not utilizing this act is some of what you mentioned, that it's never been used before outside of a congressionally declared war, that essentially concerned folks may get swept up in this if they're not a part of that gang, and then also that the president has exceeded his legal authority in using it. Now, there are critics on both sides of this, but I want to ask you, based on your experience, what do you believe is the strongest legal argument as we watch these hearings play out this week?
Well, if they're engaged in illegal conduct, or they're members of gangs that have done bad acts in the U.S., you can certainly arrest them and you can certainly deport them under the Immigration Act. Here, the president wants to deport them even quicker and en masse scale, and the Alien Act just doesn't fit it. You can argue that it does, and you can, by pretext, say we're at war with this gang, but we're not at war with Venezuela. And you have to have that connection that we're at war with Venezuela, and or these gangs are state-sponsored by Venezuela. I don't think those facts exist. I actually, as a moderate business Democrat, I like the fact that we're trying to get rid of dangerous criminals who are here illegally, no doubt about that. But as a lawyer, you got to do it by the book. You got to do it by the law. And this administration doesn't seem to be as interested in doing it by that, because they are at, quote, at war on the immigration issue, at war with reducing the government, at war with inflation and building a better economy. But there's a process and procedure under this democracy that we've got to follow. We're not an authoritarian system, and I know as much as presidential powers as Trump wants as an executive, he can't get around the other two co-equal branches of government. That's called democracy.
Well, there are certainly strong opinions on both sides of this. Scott Bolden, Christina Tobin, thank you both very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And SpaceX